Howdy folks, I'm the Roleplay Gamer and I like to party. Welcome to Let's Play Music. Today I'm going to show you a bit of Synthwave I've been working on. This is a track, it's a work in progress from an EP I'm working on, a Synthwave EP. So what is Synthwave? I'll try not to ramble on because I could go on forever about this. I'm starting to become passionate about the genre. So we'll keep it short. If you know what cyberpunk is, that sort of 80s revival, like not necessarily 80s revival, but it often is, the 80s revival vision of the future, like going back to the 80s and reimagining what they might have thought the future was. I don't think that was necessarily the case. It's like people from the 80s didn't assume the future was going to be this dystopian neon everywhere and it's always night and smoke and shit, but you know what I mean. It's like it's your Blade Runners, it's your Blood Dragon. All right. If you're on this channel, you're probably a gamer and you probably know what Blood Dragon is. If you're familiar with the visual style of Blood Dragon and the soundtrack, you know what cyberpunk and synthwave is. Synthwave is sort of it's coming back at the moment. It's a niche genre, but I feel like it's re-emerging, and I'm totes into it. So I'm trying to do a lot of it. It really appeals to me. So what is synthwave in a musical sense? Now that's a trickier question because there's no, at least not that I've found, there's no guidebook to synthwave. It's not like this is synthwave and this is how you make it. You know, when I was studying, they did have an electronic music component, but you know, even though it focused on the experimental side of things, which, you know, wasn't really my bag, even when it went to the more mainstream stuff, it didn't touch on anything even close to synthwave, which is unfortunate. I actually would have liked to have heard my lecturer's opinion on it, but that's neither here nor there. Okay, so what is it to me? To me, it's a simple, repetitive, driving, almost rock, but using electronic instruments. I feel like it's got to sound old. It's got to sound like it's from the 80s, like as best you can, which can be difficult. Like you can do it in a few different ways. You can use like iconic synth sounds. That's probably the easiest way, but you know, you got to do a little bit of research into, well, what was an iconic sound from back then. Otherwise, like using a lot of filters. I really like using a guitar simulator on the top of my synthesizer sounds, and it really beefs them up, makes them sound unique and makes them sound almost like guitars. Like you wouldn't mistake it for a guitar, but it's like, oh shit, that sounds remarkably like a guitar, even though I know it's a synth. And to me, that really brings out the sort of synthwave aesthetic that I'm looking for. But on the whole, and you know, it's like this with most music, I reckon. If it sounds good to you, and if you think it's you know, it's the genre that you're aiming for, then you're good to go. It's like you know, with recording, there's, you know, you can do all this research and study and whatnot, and try and learn all the rules and shit, but really, when it comes right down to it, if it sounds good, then it's good. That's my philosophy, you know? So often I'll see on forums and whatnot, it's like, oh, you know, tips and whatnot for an aspiring producer and whatnot. I would say, you know, if it sounds good to you, it's probably good. It's always good to get a second opinion, but if you're satisfied with it, I reckon you're on the right track. So I'm using Reaper here. It's a great DAW, digital audio workstation, if you will. I became thoroughly dissatisfied with Pro Tools. I was a Pro Tools user until about a year ago. Found Reaper. It's a hell of a lot more affordable. It runs so much better. It's more customizable, and it's just on the whole fantastic. So I will shill for Reaper till the day I die. Let's do it. You know, let's have a look at what we got here. So keep in mind that this is early days. I've spent literally like a day on this. From the first note I drew in or played to now, it's been no more than a day. Still work in progress. So anyway, enough of that. Let's have a listen. Alright, and we'll stop it there. So yeah, I'm not happy about that intro, this part here where it builds up. I feel like I need a different tone and probably a filter on that kick. If you listen to a lot of synthwave, you'll probably hear a lot of this sort of stuff where it's like the intro is a repetitive element, either a simple beat, could be as simple as a kick and a snare in this case. I think that's what I got going, isn't it? Yeah, that's right. With a filter on it that slowly opens up, or it's just a volume automation that slowly boosts. So it's like a fade in, but it's, you know, it's that sort of filtery sound. Then suddenly comes in, boom, and you got your track. I haven't quite nailed that sound there, so I've got to fix that up. But otherwise, you know, like the things that I feel really make this track is this textural part here, which I'll isolate that in a second so you know what the hell I'm talking about. And this bass line, I call it a bass line because that's what it was originally intended to be, but it's sort of like a riff now. I'll just isolate that. So it sort of serves a function of a bass line, though it doesn't quite, you know, doesn't sound like a bass. So I'm just using, I actually use a lot of free plugins, just because they're actually really good. Like Tell Bassline. It's a fantastic plugin if you want some really like driven, wild sounding basses. Even just using some of the presets and whatnot. I admit I probably should commit to learning more about synthesis. I know a little bit here and there, and I can adjust a few things to get basic sounds that I want. But you can, like, synthesis is an art in and of itself. You could just go so deep into it and then start making your own synths, whether digital or hardware synths. It's some wild stuff. But what I like to do is I'll start with a preset. I'll you know, twiddle some knobs, not to make it sound dirty, and then like dump a whole lot of effects onto it, which may sound, well, it's like I said before, you know, I know a lot of well, I suspect a lot of like pros would be like amateur, you know, if they found out that that's what I'm doing there, but it just comes back to, if it works, if it sounds good, do it, you know. Because a lot of what I'm doing here, you can't necessarily, like the fact that I'm using an amp sim on a lot of these tracks, you can't necessarily replicate that sound, you know, just with the synthesizer alone. You've got to use some crazy effects. I like using delay a lot and the like, and I've even done some crazy shit like putting the amp sim on the drum track, which you'll hear in Full Metal Soldier, I think the track is called, on the Power version 1 album, which is on my website, riccardoestate.com. That has, I believe it's at the beginning, that's got an amp sim, a sort of like a blues preset that's a little bit tweaked on the kit, and it's like, holy shit, just makes it sound, you know, like dirty and just like super tinny and in your face, right? And then it cleans up later. To me, that's sort of really satisfying. I suppose the synthwave idea is, in a sense, a little bit lo-fi, but not necessarily like that. That's not even right, because lo-fi sort of suggests low quality. It's just like driven hard. It's not pretty sounding, you know. You want some balls in it. So the other component here is this that I think really makes this what it is, makes it synthwave, is this what I've called a synth guitar tex. Tex is short for texture in this case. So that's just an arpeggiator. Let me actually show you. So what I've done here, this is, you know, basic practice of using a lot of MIDI tracks, is once you've nailed down one of your MIDI tracks, and for those who don't know, MIDI is it's like a language that converts, you know, your zeros and ones into notes. It's really old. It's actually, I think it's from the 80s. I should know that off the top of my head. So it's kind of appropriate that I'm using a lot of it here. But that's basically what like if you got a USB keyboard, a musical keyboard got running into your computer, it will communicate with your software instruments via MIDI. That's all it is. So it does allow you to like draw things in as well. You don't necessarily have to play, which is what I've done here. So when you're using a lot of MIDI tracks, it can become taxing for the system. And even if you've got a really beefy system, I've got 8 gigs of RAM and like, oh geez, was it like 3.4 gigahertz quad core processor, something like that. You know, even if you've got a decent system, it can become taxing because it's basically it's trying to read this language. Hang on, how do I say this? You know, everything's been played and processed in real time, right? Effects, the notes themselves, and shit can go wrong when you got a lot of it. It can crash your system. It can just like play things wrong as well, which I'll touch on again in a second. Sometimes you can get to do that on purpose, and it comes up with some cool components. But enough rambling. Oh yeah, so the point of that was once you're solid with a MIDI track, you can bounce it down to audio, which is what I've done here, and it incorporates all the effects into an audio track that is unaffected and using as little resources as possible. So that's what I've done. But if we just sort of switch that around and unmute the original, it's just that. That's all it is. In fact, it's not even that. It's just from there to there. That's all it is. And it's that 4 bars. Is that 4 bars? Yeah, that's 4 bars. It's a little difficult to see from here. 4 bars looped. And that's all you need. That's all you need, baby. So we'll double click on that and bring up the piano roll. This is how you can edit MIDI or just straight up draw it in using a mouse. You don't even have to use a keyboard. I like to, but I'll usually play something in and then I'll edit it. Copy and paste, make some adjustments to try and humanize it or unhumanize it, as the case may be. So there we go. So it's an arpeggiator. It's just on the A there, and it's got a couple of fiddly bits either way. I'll play it. Actually, I'll solo that. Yeah, let's have a listen. Skip ahead. Cool beans, right? Don't answer that. All right, so we can turn it back there. So it's how I had it before. So yeah, that's just really simple. That's an arpeggiator. We'll go into Kerno here, which is another free plugin. I do use. It's not only free plugins. I just happen to have found a lot of these free plugins that are great. I do use also Native Instruments Complete. I think it's Complete 9. Hang on, let me just double check. Yeah, Complete 9. Which is also fantastic. That's where I get the drums from and a lot of the other synths and whatnot. In fact, the synthesizer being used here, Massive, is from Complete 9. So yeah, this arpeggiator, Kernu by Arto Varela. I don't know, man. But this is good stuff. So hang on, where is it? Where's the? No, it's just pretty standard. We're doing we're rocking 16ths here, and I've just drawn in some notes, and I like the way it sounded as it was without doing anything too specific to it. And then I throw in an amp sim onto it, you know, adjust the volume, and we've got some rock and roll going right here. And that's sort of like, that's your texture, that's your sort of baseline. So between that and this other one here that I just showed you before, the one that's marked as bass, between the two, you've got your rhythm section sorted. you know, you've got your kick and your snare rocking, but this guitar synth textural thing almost becomes like the rest of the kit and a bit of a riff at once. And I just really like the concept of fading it in. It doesn't give you everything at once. I think that's a very important component of this sort of music. In some ways, it's really simple. Like if you pick apart a synthwave track, or even just like a house track, any sort of electronic dance music, oftentimes it's super simple. And like to the untrained ear, it's just like, well, I mean, the super untrained ear would just be like, oh, it's just electro. But if you're not, rather, a better way to put it is, if you're not paying attention, you'd be like, okay, yep, there's a bit of a riff there. There's a kick. Okay, so what? It just sort of builds. A lot of this stuff like layers and builds, which which tends to be my style as well. I really like the whole building aspect and making it very big towards the end. I suppose that's somewhat a cinematic sensibility almost, but it doesn't necessarily have to do that. Like a lot of the time with synthwave, I find it sort of has its climax like maybe 2/3 of the way through the song, and then it sort of just coasts to the end and like lets you groove on the basic idea, which is sort of what I've done here. But yeah, the point of all that was, yeah, it's often really simple, but it's like what you do with those simple parts. I feel like this track in particular, it could be simpler. You know, I'm going to keep it as it is. I like that. So this is sort of a bit of a climactic track on the EP. So I'm going to leave it how it is. But the other ones, definitely I'm going to aim to make them a little bit simpler. But yeah, like just to reiterate, it's what you do with the simple elements that makes a difference. And even just something as simple as a lot of use of the word simple here, but something as simple as fading this in gradually just gives it so much more drama. If I just like pulled it in straight up from the beginning, it's like for a couple seconds, well, at first it would be a bit jarring, and then maybe for a couple seconds, like, oh yeah, this is cool, but you'd get bored of it a lot quicker. Whereas what's happening here is from this point to this point, you've got something that's constantly changing and interesting and holding your focus. And then once it comes in properly, it's like, all right, you know, we've had our climax finally. So it's sort of like it's teasing you, right? It's teasing you with the build up. And then when it finally comes in, a bit of a hit with the gong just to mark it and give it some more power. Then you're like into it. It's like, all right, this is where it's at. And I know where we are. I've had my satisfying little climax at the beginning of the song, and we can rock it now. That might sound all, you know, a bit wanky and whatnot, but I don't know. I'm just trying my best to explain, you know, what's in my head and my reasoning for a lot of this stuff. So let's have a listen to it all together now. So there you go. Don't be afraid of repetition either. But you know, there are exceptions. Just repetition for the sake of repetition, or due to laziness, or like not really knowing what to do next. that's something you want to avoid. But I feel like if you've created a groove that is just balls to the wall awesome, and it just like gets you, and when you're putting it together yourself, you can't help but hum along or move in your seat, or you know, whichever way you like to feel the music, then I feel like you're on a winner. And if it makes you move like that, it's all right to repeat it. You know, sometimes changing an element in a song too quickly is just as detrimental, because it's like, you know, there is something to be said for giving your audience a little bit and then taking it away and making them want more. But, you know, when you're talking about a genre like synthwave, or just electro in general, which is, I suppose it's debatable as to whether synthwave is a dance genre or not, but it's not a dance genre, I guess. You know, especially when you're talking about that sort of stuff, repetition, baby. Just, I would say, like I said, just to reiterate, make that groove awesome, make it rock solid, and then you can repeat it all you want. Of course, there are limits, but you know, there are also songs that, now they're not necessarily my style, but they've otherwise been very successful. Dance tracks that are basically the same thing, just repeated over and over again. Maybe the odd little stab from other sort of other instruments, but otherwise very minimal. And that has a place too, because you know, you go the clubs and everyone's on pingers, you know, it's their prerogative, and they just want to listen to, they're not even listening really, they just want to move to something repetitive. Everything has a market. But back to synthwave after I've gone on that rant. So yeah, you know, I've had my bit. I've introduced this big thing here. The basic groove. I've given you the main information of the song. I've informed you as to what it's about. And then we change. Then we have a little interlude. And again, repetition. So how do you make this interesting? Well, just a bit of panning. Now, panning means moving in a stereo setup. So, you know, left and right. Panning allows you to place the sound anywhere between completely left, completely right, or perfectly balanced. Now, by default, most of these instruments will be perfectly balanced, so an equal amount going into the left ear and the right ear, assuming you're wearing headphones, or the left speaker or the right speaker. Now, you can pan, like I said, any proportion, you know, between the two. So what I've got here is, let's just play it. Right, so wait for the delay to dissipate. So I've got 4 repetitions of this little thing here, and just for your own information, this is actually what's going on in the rest of the track. I've actually used the same basic riff, if you will, but I've just shortened this. I've actually done it double time, so instead of this going over 4 bars, it's over 2 bars, and it makes it sound different, but it still works with everything else that's going on. So, you know, referencing is another good thing. That's what I'd call it. You know, you don't necessarily have to create something entirely new for a new part. It's not being lazy reusing something. It's connecting them, right? It's making them relevant within the track. Anyway, so back to panning. So what I've just done, it's just a subtle pan, just 30% right, 30% left, 30% right, 30% left. And so it's not a hard pan meaning it's all in one ear, all in one speaker. And that can be quite jarring sometimes. Sometimes it's all right to do it, but for the most part, I try to avoid it because just like, oh shit, too much information in the one ear and it makes the listener feel imbalanced, especially if they're wearing headphones. So just a subtle pan of 30% is enough to say, oh, the sound is moving. That's cool. And it's making it interesting, even though it's 4 repetitions of the exact same thing. Again, it's using repetition, but using it intelligently. No, I don't want to sound like I'm tuning my own horn, but you know what I mean. And then we go back. Right, so we're back to what we were before, but we introduce a little bit more information, and it is really just a little bit. What we've got here is, I've dubbed it taiko, as in the drums, the taiko drums, but it's actually, is it? Hang on, or is that just taiko? Wait a second. Hang on. We go back to play. Oh, that is just taiko drums. Oh, no, that's right. That's right, because it's using sticks as well. Yeah. We go into that. There we go. It's using... Yeah, it's hitting the rim, I believe. That's what that sound is. So, yeah, it's just a big old drum and hitting the sticks as well. And it's sparse, you know? We've already got, you know, the beat information. The kick and the snare are giving you that pulse. So you don't need to reiterate that. This is highlighting... other interesting rhythmic information. So for me, it's like it's sort of feeling the way you move to it, and then you know highlighting that. So it's almost like people dancing to it, and it's like, no, you're right. That's right. That's where you want to put in a little, you know, swing of your hip or something. That's the way I think about it. To me, I try not to think in terms of. I suppose I don't think about it mathematically. If that's probably the best way to describe it. It's like, oh, this needs specifically is this kind of rhythm. I just sort of listen to it, feel it out, and I go, yeah, this needs a hit there, and it needs another hit there. So let's just listen to that again. And you'll notice that, waiting for the delay, there we go. And you'll notice that they all hit on the snare, not the bass. So it's not the offbeat, but it's sort of like, it's not the 1 and the 3. Whereas the snare is hitting on the 2 and the 4, I believe. So again, it's sort of like, it's not giving you like the sort of like the start of the phrase sort of information. It's like, you know, we've already got that. We've got the pulse, and then it's like just on the side, you know, give it a little something, drive it along. And that's it. That is the only other element that's added to that section, but it just gives it something. At least I think it does. And then we move on. We got that that little high textual thing coming back. You know, that thing that comes back. But what do I do there to make it interesting? Well, I've faded it in. It doesn't just come at you. It's like, so you already know what it is, right? So as it starts to fade in, it's like, oh, that thing's coming back. You know, I'm familiar with that. So now I know what it is. We can hear it in a different way. I don't need to have it forced down my throat again. And then we bring in some pads just to like sort of give it some grandiose, like almost filmic, landscapey kind of spatial stuff. For the reverb, there we go. So there you go. Again, this track isn't final. There are some sounds I'd like to adjust. I'd like to try and make that pad a pad meaning, you know, sort of slow, long notes. Nothing textual. Textual. When I say textual, I mean it's got a lot of rhythmic information, and it's not necessarily giving you notes or chords. It's like, this is more like, I might incorporate notes and chords, or rather chords incorporate notes. So, but you know what I mean. It's more like to give you rhythm, but isn't necessarily like drums or something. So yeah, this pad here, the strings, and it's actually not just strings. It's strings mixed with a synth, and this is something else I really like to do. I like to mix instruments and try and create new sounds using multiple different instruments. Yeah, so I'd like to try and make that sound a little bit airier, and then we kick it in. You know, I like that so much. I'm like, well, let's give it some meat. Once we head towards the end of the song, so I'll just show you the climax here. And there you go. We just have it fade out. There we go. To me, this genre it is very filmic. You know, it's not the type of, like I said before, I sort of hinted at, synthwave is not necessarily the type of genre that you dance to. You can dance to it. You can certainly groove to it. I find this track very groovy, if I do say so myself. But it's not necessarily the type of thing you would find in a club. People, you know, rubbing up upon each other, sweating on each other, on pingers and whatnot. It's so... You know, I try to think filmically, and as such, I tend to avoid, you know, abrupt ending to songs rather. And this is something I've noticed in other people's work as well, other people's synthwave tracks. It does tend to, you know, fade out or you know, move into the next track fairly seamlessly. It's almost like it's less a specific story. Like if we want to get a little bit wanky here and talk about narrative in music, it's less a specific focus story and more like a landscape. It's like yeah, it's talking about the post-apocalyptic, sorry, not necessarily post-apocalyptic, but like dystopian future sort of stuff. It's like, this is the way the world is, right? And as such, it's sort of like a landscape shot as opposed to a portrait, if we want to like liken it to photography or something, or painting. So there you go. I've actually just used organs. Funnily enough, I find that organs really work. I've used two types of organs to give it some meat and give it some grunt, and it is going through this nifty little plugin that's a bit of a tape simulator. So it's not like fantastic, but it does a little bit to dirty up the sound, which I really like. So you just give it some drive and gives it some chunk. It's a nice type of distortion, as long as you don't push it too far. And I got that on a lot of the tracks, and I find that depending on the instrument, that can really help to get that old sound that I'm looking for the synthwave aesthetic. So yeah, I've just got a couple organs in there, and it makes it driving. It gives the strings and the synth, you know, just it gives it a little bit more, and it makes it sound less soft and touchy-feely and nice, you know, gives it something dirty. And then it's like, you know, like I said, there's your climax, and then it sort of fades out for a good portion of the song. Probably, yeah, that's probably about a quarter, maybe less. I don't know, maybe a sixth of the song. I don't know. I was never good at fractions. So for a good chunk of the song, it's just sort of, it dies down and it layers out. Layering in, you know, I talked about layering in before, but just as important, layering out. Deciding which instruments to take out first, and it's usually the ones that are the most busy or like the thickest. So for example, what's going on here is this pad, the strings, and then the organs that come in with it. It's chords. You can see it's got, I think it's just unison actually. So chords is probably not the right term there. Yeah, as you can see. Oh, that sounds kind of cool. That low rumble there. Yeah, so it's unison, but we've got, you know, we've got multiple notes going on there, and it's quite thick, and it's giving us a lot of information. So that's the first to go. I mean, you could keep that going because it's not necessarily textual. Like I said before, textual, you know, more rhythmic as opposed to harmonic, if you know what that means. But considering that was the last one to come in, that's, you know, that's generally the first one to go out. And that seems to be how I've handled it here. It's sort of a matter of, you know, with the exception of this guitar sounding synth here, even though this didn't start at the beginning of the song, I've kept it in because I feel it's really important. It's really nice, and hearing it isolated really for the first time. Because, you know, like I said, it's never really on its own, except for the end of the song, and then you can start to appreciate it. And it's got some complexity in it that you don't realize until it's more exposed. And I really appreciate that. But then again, it's sort of like, you know, you're bookending it. It faded in and it's fading out. So similar sort of principle of You just, when you're layering in, you reverse the order when you're layering out. And there you go. That's pretty much it. That's the way to go. I mean, I've rambled a lot. I actually didn't intend for this video to be that long, and honestly, I'm just trying out a different format, trying out some new things. I hope you enjoy it. I mean, I'm going to hopefully refine things as we go further, and if there are any questions, you know, I might do some tutorials, or maybe, you know, still these types of videos, but still this format, but answer specific questions that you've asked. But we'll see how we go. There you go, guys. So I'm the Roleplay Gamer. Make sure you like, subscribe, and comment, and taste the game, or taste the music in this case. Make sure you check out my other music at riccardoestate.com, top of the screen there, and link in the description. And follow me on Twitter for updates and the like. Be excellent to each other, and I'll see you next time. I'll leave you with the full track playing so you can hear it start to finish. There we go. Be excellent to each other, guys, and I'll see you next time. Roleplay Gamer out.